I watched their faces harden as I pushed the incident report back across the table. No, I won't sign this. Lorna's perfectly penciled eyebrows pinched together. You need to understand the seriousness of your situation, Vivian. She tapped her finger on the stack of papers. We have six witness statements describing how you physically assaulted both Ellis and Gray on Tuesday. You grabbed Ellis by his tie and shoved Gray against the wall in front of the entire production team. My heart hammered against my ribs, but I kept my breathing steady. The industrial fans whirred overhead in the cramped HR office, their constant drone almost drowning out the production line's rhythmic thumping beyond the thin walls. That's impossible, I said quietly. I wasn't even here Tuesday. Gray leaned forward, his wedding ring clinking against the table. Lying won't help your case. Multiple witnesses saw you. You've been increasingly hostile since we denied your request to slow production. The accusation hung between us like toxic fumes. 6 months ago, I might have broken down crying, begged them to believe me. Not anymore. I spent Tuesday at Memorial with my mother during her chemotherapy treatment. Checked the visitor logs. Call her oncologist. Ellis snorted. Very convenient. His eyes never left his watch. We're not here to debate this. Either sign the incident report acknowledging your behavior, or we terminate your employment immediately. Lorna slid a termination notice beside the incident report. Your choice, Vivian. But think carefully. 7 years here thrown away? And for what? A momentary loss of control? We're prepared to be lenient if you show remorse. I glanced at the accusation again. Attacking Ellis and Gray. From the statement dates, they'd fabricated this entire scenario within 48 hours of my safety complaint. The clock on the wall showed 9:57. My pulse calmed as I reached for my bag. I think we're done here, I said. Gray's face flushed. You're making a mistake. Sign the report, take a suspension, and we move on. No one wants this getting messy. I unzipped my bag, and their eyes tracked my movements. The plant hummed and shuddered around us, the same sounds I'd heard for 7 years, but today they felt different, final. What time is it, Ellis? I asked. He frowned, glancing at his watch. 3 minutes to 10. What does that? The reception phone buzzed, cutting him off. Lorna snatched it up. I said no interruptions. Her face drained of color as she listened. Send them to conference room A. We'll be right there. She hung up, her composure cracking. There are government officials in the lobby. OSHA inspectors, I clarified, standing slowly. They're here about the safety complaint I filed 14 days ago, the one you received formal notice of last week. I shouldered my bag. Interesting timing with these assault allegations, don't you think? Ellis's mouth opened and closed. Gray gripped the edge of the table so hard his knuckles whitened. You contacted OSHA? Lorna whispered. After the third burn injury on line 5. But you knew that already. I checked my watch. The inspectors will want to see those emergency exits you've kept chained since February. And they'll probably ask about the machine guards you removed last month to boost production. The office fell silent, except for the distant clang of metal and hiss of pressurized lines. In that moment, I saw the truth in their eyes. They'd never expected consequences. Before I continue further, thank you for finding my story. If you're enjoying it so far, please hit that like button and subscribe to support more content like this. Your comments mean everything, so let me know if you've ever experienced workplace retaliation. You might be surprised how common it is. My name is Vivian Reese. I'm 32, single, with more plants than friends and an unhealthy addiction to true crime podcasts. Before all this happened, I was just another quality inspector at Mid-State Manufacturing, diligent, unnoticed, the kind who brought homemade cookies to team meetings but never got invited to happy hour. I hadn't planned to become a whistleblower. For years, I'd looked the other way, same as everyone else. The pace was brutal, but the pay was decent, and Mom's medical bills kept piling up. I needed this job. We all did. Things began changing when Axle Corporation bought our plant 2 years ago. The first cuts came to maintenance, efficiency adjustments, they called them. Then safety meetings became quarterly instead of weekly. Protective equipment disappeared from supply orders. Training programs for new hires shortened from 2 weeks to 2 days. Still, we adapted. We shared welding gloves when there weren't enough. We warned the new people about which machines jammed. We worked around missing guards and bypassed safety switches when supervisors pressured us to meet quotas. I might have continued looking away if not for Marco. He was 19, working nights to pay for community college. Sweet kid, always showing me pictures of his dog. One night in March, he called me at 2 a.m. "They're making me run the stamping press," he'd whispered. I told them I'm not trained on it. "Don't touch that machine," I'd said immediately. "It needs both hands on the triggers," or, "The supervisor bypassed the triggers. Says it's faster with the foot pedal only." I sat up in bed. "Marco, walk away. That's not safe. I can't lose this job, Viv." The next call came from the ER. The press had engaged while Marco was adjusting the metal sheet. 2 fingers gone. The company's response? They fired him for willfully disregarding safety protocols. I still remember his mother's face at the hospital, how she'd clutched my hands. "He says you tried to warn him." Something broke inside me that night. The next morning, I began keeping notes on every violation I saw. Not on company computers or phones, on paper notebooks I kept at home. Every missing guard, every disabled emergency stop, every untrained worker assigned to dangerous equipment. I noted dates, times, supervisor names. I took photos when no one was looking. When Line 5's chemical heater exploded in April, burning 3 workers, management blamed operator error despite maintenance requests for that equipment dating back months. The burned workers were all fired while still recovering. I called OSHA the next day, detailing everything I'd documented over 3 months. The representative said they'd investigate but warned me. Whistleblower retaliation is real. Be prepared. I thought I was. I'd read the statutes, knew my rights. What I hadn't anticipated was how quickly Lorna, Ellis, and Gray would fabricate an assault case against me. Now they stood frozen as footsteps approached the HR office. The door swung open, revealing a woman in a navy blazer holding a government ID. Behind her stood 3 more inspectors in safety vests. "I'm Inspector Yates with OSHA. We're beginning an unannounced, comprehensive safety inspection based on a formal complaint." Her eyes swept over the termination papers on the table. "And you must be Vivian Reese?" I nodded. "Perfect timing. I'd like to speak with you privately after we do our initial walkthrough." She turned to the management team. "You 3 are?" Lorna recovered first, extending her hand. "Lorna Perry, HR Director. This is completely unexpected. We typically require advance. Under Federal Regulation 29 CFR 1903.3, we're authorized to conduct unannounced inspections." Inspector Yates interrupted. "We'll need immediate access to all production areas, maintenance logs, training records, and injury reports for the past 3 years." Ellis stepped forward. "Our company attorney should be present for." "You're welcome to call your attorney," another inspector said. "But we begin now. Delaying federal safety inspectors is a separate violation." I watched the realization dawn on their faces. For the first time in 2 years, they weren't in control. "We'll cooperate fully," Gray said, his voice strained. He glared at me with such hatred. I felt it like heat. As we all moved toward the production floor, Lorna gripped my arm, falling behind the others. Her nails dug into my skin. "You think you've won something here?" she hissed. "After today, you'll never work in manufacturing again. I promise you that." I gently removed her hand. "Let's catch up with the inspectors. I believe they'll want to see the basement storage area where you're hiding the removed machine guards." Her face contorted. "How did you—" "I pay attention, Lorna. That's all." The next 4 hours were a blur of inspections, photos, and increasingly damning discoveries. The inspectors found blocked fire exits, disabled emergency stops, missing machine guards, and improperly stored chemicals. They interviewed workers while supervisors hovered nervously. With each violation, Ellis, Gray, and Lorna grew more desperate. By lunchtime, Inspector Yates had filled 3 violation worksheets. "This is just the beginning," she told me as we stood in the break room. "Based on what we've seen so far, we'll be here for days." That's when Ellis approached, his smile tight. "Vivian, could I speak with you? In private?" Inspector Yates frowned. "Miss Reese is scheduled for an official interview regarding her complaint." "Just 2 minutes," Ellis insisted. The inspector looked at me. I nodded. Ellis led me to a quiet corner, his back to the inspectors. "Name your price," he whispered. "Excuse me? Be reasonable. Whatever they're offering for your cooperation, we'll double it, triple it. Just tell them you exaggerated your complaint." I studied him, this man who'd threatened my livelihood hours earlier. "What's happening here isn't about money," I said. He leaned closer. "Then what do you want? A promotion? Your own department? We can make that happen today." Before I could answer, a commotion erupted from the production floor, shouting, the sharp metal-on-metal crash of equipment failing. We rushed out to see workers scrambling away from line 3, where hydraulic fluid sprayed in a high-pressure stream from a burst line. 2 inspectors were already taking photos, as Gray frantically tried to stop them. This is exactly what I reported, I told Inspector Yates, who'd appeared beside me. That line has been leaking for months. As if on cue, the spraying fluid ignited when it reached a nearby heating element. Flames erupted, triggering the ancient sprinkler system. While workers grabbed fire extinguishers, I noticed something that made my blood freeze. The emergency alarm wasn't sounding, and the fire doors, the ones that should automatically close in exactly this scenario, remained open. The system's been disabled, I shouted to Inspector Yates over the chaos. Her expression hardened as she took in the scene. She grabbed her radio. This inspection is now elevated to imminent danger status. I need additional compliance officers and technical specialists here immediately. Through the sprinkler rain, I locked eyes with Gray. In that moment, I knew 2 things with absolute certainty. They would do anything to stop this inspection, and I had just become their most dangerous enemy. The sprinklers drenched us as workers frantically fought the flames. Through the chaos, I noticed Ellis slip away toward the administrative offices. Something in his hurried movements sent alarm bells ringing in my mind. Inspector Yates, I said. Someone should check if they're removing files. She nodded sharply and dispatched one of her team members to follow. The fire was contained within minutes, but the damage was done. Not just to line 3, but to any pretense that this facility operated safely. Everyone out, Inspector Yates announced, her voice carrying across the wet floor. This facility is being temporarily shut down under imminent danger procedures. Gray rushed forward. You can't do that. We have production quotas. I can and I am, she interrupted. Your fire suppression systems are compromised, emergency alarms disabled, and I count at least 17 imminent danger violations. This facility will remain closed pending full inspection and abatement. Workers exchanged glances, some relieved, others anxious about lost wages. Lorna appeared, frantically whispering to Gray, as they both eyed me with undisguised hostility. All employees, Inspector Yates continued, you'll be contacted about interviews. You're legally protected from retaliation for cooperating with OSHA. She handed out business cards. If anyone pressures you about your statements, call this number immediately. As workers filed out, Marco's replacement, a quiet college student named Zoe, approached me. Is this because of what happened to Marco? She whispered. Partly, I admitted. And the burns on line 5, and everything else they've ignored. She glanced nervously at the supervisors. They'll make us pay for this. Not if OSHA does their job, I replied, hoping I sounded more confident than I felt. Inspector Yates pulled me aside as the floor emptied. We need to document your complaint formally. And I should mention, she lowered her voice, your coworker was right. The inspector who followed your manager found him shredding maintenance request logs. My stomach tightened. Of course they'd try destroying evidence. I'd expected nothing less. Miss Reese, she continued, I want to be clear. This is one of the most hazardous workplaces I've seen in 15 years with OSHA. Your complaint potentially saved lives. Her words should have been comforting, but all I could think about were Lorna's threats. Even with OSHA here, I knew this wasn't over. The next week was a blur of official interviews, documentation reviews, and increasingly desperate attempts by management to minimize the violations. Workers were called into impromptu meetings, where Gray and Ellis emphasized the exaggerated nature of the complaints and reminded everyone about company loyalty. Few seemed convinced. I spent hours with OSHA inspectors, walking them through everything I'd observed over the past year. Each day revealed new violations, falsified training records, unreported injuries, maintenance logs showing equipment failures that management ignored for months. 7 days after the initial inspection, OSHA delivered preliminary findings. 43 serious violations with proposed penalties exceeding $2 million. The plant would remain closed until critical safety issues were addressed. That evening, as I left the makeshift OSHA interview room, Ellis was waiting in the parking lot beside my car. The sunset cast long shadows across the empty lot, and I briefly considered turning back. Vivian, he called, his voice surprisingly gentle. Just talk to me, please. I approached cautiously, keys gripped between my fingers. There's nothing to discuss. Look at what you've done. He gestured toward the darkened plant. 300 people out of work. For what? Some missing guardrails? Some paperwork issues? Paperwork issues? I echoed in disbelief. 3 people have permanent burn scars. Marco lost his fingers. Peterson still has breathing problems from chemical exposure. Ellis sighed heavily. Accidents happen in manufacturing. You know that. These weren't accidents. They were negligence. He stepped closer. The board is flying in tomorrow. They're talking about permanent closure. His voice dropped. But it doesn't have to go that way. You could help salvage this. How exactly would I do that? Tell OSHA you exaggerated. Say you were angry about being passed over for promotion. We'll back you up. Say we overreacted with the disciplinary action. You get your job back with a raise. Everyone wins. The audacity was almost impressive. And the violations just disappear? We'll fix the major issues. The rest, he shrugged. Administrative settlements. It happens all the time. I studied his face in the fading light. What about Marco? The burn victims. Do they get their jobs back too? His expression hardened. Don't be naive. This is business. So is safety, I replied, unlocking my car. I'll see you at tomorrow's hearing. As I drove away, Ellis's words echoed in my mind. 300 people out of work. I'd known there would be consequences, but the weight of responsibility felt suddenly crushing. What if the plant did close permanently? What would happen to my coworkers? To me? When I arrived home, Mom was awake, watching the local news from her recliner. The plant closure was the lead story. That's your work, she said, as I hung up my coat. Her voice was thin from treatments, but her eyes were sharp. You did this? I nodded, sinking onto the couch. I filed the complaint that started it. She studied me for a long moment. Good. 300 people might lose their jobs, Mom. And how many might have lost their lives if nothing changed? She reached for my hand. You remember your father. How could I forget? Dad had worked at a different factory, one just as profit-obsessed and safety-indifferent. The investigation after his death revealed the machine that crushed him had known safety defects. Defects reported multiple times but never addressed. I was 11 when we buried him, I said quietly. The company sent flowers and a form letter. And a check, Mom added bitterly. Barely enough for the funeral. She squeezed my hand. You did what he would have done, if he'd known how. That night, I barely slept. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the faces of coworkers who might blame me for their financial hardship. But I also saw Marco's missing fingers, the burn victims, my father's casket. The hearing began at 9 a.m. the next day. The company had flown in their corporate legal team. 5 attorneys in matching dark suits. Ellis, Gray, and Lorna sat together, flanked by 2 men I recognized from the corporate board. The conference room at the OSHA field office barely contained everyone. As workers filed in to testify, the atmosphere grew tense. Would they support my claims or fear for their jobs? The first interviews brought surprising relief. Maintenance workers confirmed requests for repairs had been repeatedly denied. Line supervisors admitted removing safety guards increased production speed. A payroll clerk revealed injury reports were routinely classified as non-recordable to avoid mandatory reporting. During a break, I overheard Ellis arguing with one of the board members. We had no idea conditions were this bad, the older man was saying. This is beyond unacceptable. Production targets had to be met, Ellis insisted. The quarterly bonuses depended on it. So you risked worker lives for bonuses? The board member looked disgusted. Everyone knew the situation. No one complained. Except one person did complain, the board member said, noticing me listening. And instead of addressing the issues, you fabricated an assault claim against her. Ellis's face flushed. We had reliable witnesses. Witnesses who've since admitted you pressured them to lie. Inspector Yates interrupted, joining the conversation. That's a separate federal violation. We're investigating. The blood drained from Ellis's face. That's not. We have signed statements from 3 employees, she continued. They were told to sign pre-written accounts of an assault that never happened or face termination themselves. I hadn't known this development. As Ellis struggled for words, Lorna appeared, pulling him away with frantic whispers. The board member gave me a long look before following them. By afternoon, the pattern had become clear. Systemic safety violations, driven by production bonuses for management. The corporate attorneys grew increasingly silent as testimony mounted. During the final session, the board chairman addressed the room. Based on what we've heard today, significant changes are necessary. He looked directly at me. Miss Reese, While we cannot discuss personnel matters publicly, I want to assure you and everyone here that the actions taken against you were unauthorized and unacceptable. Ellis and Gray stared at the table. Lorna typed furiously on her phone. The plant will remain closed for 4 weeks while we implement mandatory safety improvements, the chairman continued. All employees will receive full pay during this period. Murmurs of relief rippled through the workers present. Additionally, we're restructuring plant management effective immediately. Ellis's head snapped up. Further announcements will come through proper channels, the chairman finished. As the hearing concluded, workers surrounded me, some offering thanks, others sharing safety concerns they'd kept silent for years. The dam had broken. For the first time since I'd filed the complaint, I felt vindicated rather than vilified. That feeling lasted until I reached my car. My windshield was spiderwebbed with cracks, a cinder block sitting on my hood. Taped to what remained of my windshield was a note, "This isn't over." I photographed everything before calling the police, my hands shaking. While waiting, Director Yates arrived at her own vehicle. "What happened?" she asked, rushing over. I showed her the damage and note. Her expression darkened. "This is textbook intimidation," she said, taking her own photos. "Do you have somewhere safe to stay tonight?" I thought of Mom, weak from chemotherapy. "Yes, but I can't leave my current place." She nodded grimly. "We can request police patrols. And this incident strengthens our retaliation case." She hesitated. "The next few weeks won't be easy. The plant reopening doesn't mean this situation is resolved." "I know," I said, watching as Ellis exited the building, pointedly looking in our direction. I never expected it would be. What I couldn't tell her, what I'd told no one, was that the complaint to OSHA had only been my first move. I'd spent months preparing for what might come next, gathering information beyond safety violations, because in a company where executives valued bonuses over human lives, I suspected the rot went deeper than missing machine guards. And when Inspector Yates had mentioned management bonuses tied to production, I'd seen the flash of panic in Ellis's eyes. That reaction confirmed what I'd begun to suspect months ago, when I'd noticed discrepancies between actual production numbers and what appeared in quarterly reports. For now, though, I needed to focus on immediate safety, both for me and for 300 workers whose livelihoods hung in the balance. The plant would reopen, but nothing would return to normal. As Ellis crossed the parking lot with Gray and Lorna, he locked eyes with me one final time. His message was clear. Whatever victory I thought I'd won was temporary. What he didn't know was that I'd anticipated every move they'd made so far, and I was counting on what they would do next. The plant reopened exactly 4 weeks later. New guardrails gleamed on the production lines. Emergency exits stood unblocked with alarm systems tested daily. Fresh safety posters covered the walls. During the shutdown, every employee had received specialized training on proper procedures and their right to refuse unsafe work. On the surface, everything had changed. Underneath, tensions simmered. Ellis and Gray had been reassigned to corporate headquarters, a move most workers recognized as damage control rather than punishment. Lorna remained, now working alongside a new plant manager named Teresa Woods, sent from corporate with a mandate to transform the safety culture. My first day back, Teresa called me to her office. Unlike the windowless HR room where I'd faced termination, her space had glass walls, visibility as policy. "Vivian, thank you for coming," she said, gesturing to a chair. "I've reviewed the entire situation. What you experienced was unacceptable." I nodded cautiously. "I want to offer you a position on our new safety committee. Full authority to stop production if you identify hazards, reporting directly to me." She slid a paper across her desk. With appropriate compensation adjustment, the offer showed a 30% salary increase. Substantial, but not life-changing. "I appreciate that," I said. "But I'm concerned about long-term commitment to these changes." Teresa leaned forward. "Corporate is serious about transformation. The board was horrified by what happened, and the retaliation against me, being addressed at the highest levels." Her expression softened. "The vandalism of your car was inexcusable. We're working with authorities to identify who was responsible." I studied her, trying to gauge her sincerity. Teresa seemed genuinely committed, but she wasn't the problem. The system was. Ellis and Gray might be gone, but their influence remained in supervisors they'd hired and processes they'd established. "I'll consider the offer," I said finally. Over the next 2 weeks, I watched carefully as operations resumed. Most safety improvements held firm, but subtle problems emerged. Maintenance requests took days longer when submitted by workers who'd supported my complaint. Schedule preferences mysteriously favored those who'd stayed silent. Lorna remained a particular concern. Though officially demoted from HR director to specialist, she still controlled personnel files and influenced hiring decisions. I frequently felt her watching me from across the floor. During week 3, the isolation tactics began. Lunch tables emptied when I approached. Conversations stopped mid-sentence when I entered break rooms. Anonymous notes appeared in my locker. Job killer, and how long until we close for good? Teresa seemed oblivious, focused on impressing, visiting corporate representatives with our safety transformation. When I raised concerns about the workplace climate, she smiled tightly. Change takes time, Vivian. People are adjusting. The real blow came a month after reopening. 5 workers who'd provided statements to OSHA were transferred to night shift, despite seniority. When they protested, Lorna explained it was operational necessity. That same day, our main break room television played a loop of financial news reporting our parent company's stock dropping due to unexpected compliance costs at the mid-state facility. The message was clear. My complaint had hurt everyone's financial future. I found Teresa in her office, reviewing production reports. The transfers were retaliation, I said, without preamble. She sighed. That's a serious accusation. 5 workers who testified for OSHA all moved to night shift despite 3 having seniority? That's not coincidence. Lorna provided documentation showing operational needs. Lorna is continuing what Ellis started, I interrupted, punishing anyone who spoke up. Teresa set down her pen. Vivian, we've made extraordinary accommodations. New safety equipment, training programs, your position on the safety committee. But this business still needs to function profitably. Profitably doesn't mean illegally. Her expression hardened slightly. I'd be careful about throwing around accusations without evidence. I left her office wondering if I'd misjudged her. Was she complicit or just naive? That evening, Mom noticed my distraction as we ate dinner. Something's happened, she said, setting down her fork. The chemo had ended, but recovery was slow. Her hands still trembled. Just work politics, I replied. Nothing important. Vivian Marie Reese. Her tone made me look up. You've never been a good liar. I managed a small smile. The safety improvements are holding, but the culture isn't changing. They're isolating the whistleblowers, making examples of us. Can you report it again? It's subtle this time. Hard to prove. I pushed food around my plate, and everyone blames me for the stock drop affecting their 401k plans. Mom reached across the table. Your father would be proud of you. Whatever happens. I know, I said, though doubt gnawed at me. I just wonder if it was worth it. The next morning, I arrived to find my workstation relocated to a corner far from other quality inspectors. My new desk faced a blank wall instead of the production floor. When I questioned Lorna, she smiled sweetly. Space optimization. The memo went out last week. No such memo existed. I knew because I'd checked everyone's inboxes through the shared calendar system. A trick I'd learned while gathering evidence before the OSHA complaint. That afternoon, a maintenance worker named Hector stopped me in a quiet hallway. They're saying you're getting a big settlement, he whispered, checking over his shoulder. That you planned this from the beginning for money. Who's saying that? Supervisors. Lorna, they told Zoe, you bragged about it. I shook my head. There's no settlement. They showed her an email. From you to some lawyer. He seemed unsure now, talking about a multi-million-dollar whistleblower claim. My blood ran cold. They were fabricating evidence again. This time to turn workers against me by painting me as greedy rather than concerned about safety. The next day confirmed my suspicions. Sideways glances, whispers that stopped when I approached. Even Teresa seemed distant during the safety committee meeting, cutting me off mid-sentence when I raised concerns about chemical storage. By Friday, the pressure intensified. A printout of a fake email, supposedly from me to a law firm discussing a lucrative settlement strategy, circulated through the break rooms. My denials fell on increasingly hostile ears. That evening, Teresa called me into her office. Lorna sat beside her desk, a satisfied smile playing at her lips. We need to discuss your performance, Teresa began, sliding a document toward me. There have been concerns about your inspection thoroughness since returning. I glanced at the paper. A performance improvement plan, the first step toward termination. My inspection records are perfect, I said. Ask any line supervisor. We've received reports that you're distracted, rushing checks. Teresa wouldn't meet my eyes. Given recent events, we want to be procedurally correct in addressing performance concerns. This is retaliation, I said flatly. Lorna's smile widened. That's a serious accusation. Do you have evidence? Something in her smug certainty made everything clear. They believed they were winning, that I was isolated, discredited, and without recourse, just as they'd planned. Actually, I said slowly, I do have evidence. Quite a lot of it. Teresa frowned. Regarding this performance evaluation? Regarding everything. I stood up, suddenly calm, including why Ellis and Gray were so desperate to remove me before the OSHA inspection. Lorna's smile faltered. I didn't just document safety violations, I continued. I also recorded the production number alterations, the quality test manipulations, the shipping of defective products to aerospace and medical clients. Teresa's expression shifted from confusion to alarm. What are you talking about? For the past year, this facility has been falsifying quality certifications to ship substandard parts. Ellis and Gray collected bonuses based on production numbers while shipping defective components to customers who use them in aircraft and medical devices. Lorna stood abruptly. These are wild accusations. I have copies of the original test results alongside the altered reports submitted to customers. I interrupted, plus emails between Ellis and Gray discussing how to hide the discrepancies from corporate auditors. Teresa's face had gone pale. Why didn't you include this in your OSHA complaint? Because it's not OSHA's jurisdiction. It's the FBI's, and the Department of Transportation's, and the FDA's. I met Lorna's eyes directly, which is why I submitted separate whistleblower complaints to all three agencies 6 months ago. Lorna sank back into her chair. The OSHA investigation was just the beginning, I explained. I needed to see how management would respond, whether you'd address the problems or double down on covering them up. Teresa looked stricken. Are you saying federal criminal investigators are involved? They've been building their case while OSHA handled the safety violations, gathering financial records, interviewing former employees, tracking the defective parts. I nodded toward the window where workers continued their shifts, testing components pulled from the marketplace. As if on cue, my phone buzzed. I checked the message and couldn't help a small smile. That's my contact at the FBI. They're executing search warrants at Ellis and Gray's homes right now. Corporate headquarters, too. I looked up. They'll be here within the hour. Lorna lunged for her computer. Teresa grabbed her arm. Don't even think about deleting anything, she warned, her voice suddenly steely. That would be obstruction of justice. I stood to leave. The performance improvement plan? Teresa pushed it aside. Obviously a misunderstanding. In the hallway, I took my first deep breath in months. The timing was perfect. Exactly as Special Agent Rivera had promised when I'd met with her team back in January, long before the OSHA complaint. We'll let the safety investigation play out first, she'd explained. See how management responds. That builds our case for willful misconduct in the quality fraud. I'd provided them everything. Test reports showing components, failing strength tests, but shipping anyway. Emails, directing quality techs to adjust failing results. Financial records showing Ellis and Gray's bonuses tied to production volumes regardless of quality outcomes. When federal agents arrived that evening, workers watched in shock as they seized computers and files. Lorna was escorted out, her face ashen as an agent recited Miranda rights. By morning, Business News reported federal fraud investigations into quality falsification at multiple Axle Corporation facilities. 3 weeks later, I testified before a grand jury about the systemic fraud. Ellis, Gray, and Lorna were indicted on multiple federal charges including fraud, conspiracy, and making false statements about product safety. The corporate board faced SEC investigations for misleading shareholders. Most importantly, every potentially defective component had been traced and recalled. No failures had occurred in the field. No one had been injured by our substandard parts. 6 months after the OSHA inspection, I sat in a new office at the State Manufacturing Oversight Board, surrounded by case files from other facilities, seeking my help with compliance programs. Sometimes I wonder if Ellis, Gray, and Lorna ever realized their biggest mistake wasn't falsifying safety reports or shipping defective parts. It was assuming that someone who meticulously documented safety violations wouldn't be documenting everything else too. Their greed left a trail of evidence I merely had to collect and organize. The plant still operates, now under completely new management with the strongest safety record in the corporation. My former coworkers received compensation from the corporate settlement, and many have become safety advocates themselves. As for me, I found my voice, not just in standing up to corporate wrongdoing, but in helping others do the same. Because the most complete revenge isn't watching wrongdoers face consequences, though that matters. It's creating a system where their actions would never be tolerated in the first place. If you've ever faced workplace retaliation or unsafe conditions, know that you're not alone. There are protections for whistleblowers and resources to help. Leave a comment sharing your experience, or like and subscribe to help others find this story. Remember, speaking up isn't just your right, sometimes it's what saves lives.